In early 2023, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, one of the most prestigious defense think tanks in Washington, ran a series of highly detailed, unclassified war games simulating a Chinese amphibious invasion of Taiwan in the year 2026. They ran the simulation 24 separate times, altering the variables, the troop movements, and the political responses. The results were a massive wake-up call for the Western alliance. In the vast majority of the scenarios, the United States, Japan, and Australia successfully defended the island. The invasion was repelled. The Chinese amphibious fleet was sent to the bottom of the Taiwan Strait. But there was a terrifying, deeply uncomfortable caveat to this victory. In almost every single iteration of the war game, the United States completely exhausted its global inventory of long-range anti-ship missiles, WRASM, within the first 4 to 7 days of the conflict. 4 days. After those first 96 hours of high-intensity combat, the primary weapon designed to sink the Chinese Navy was gone. The silos were empty. The magazines were dry. And because these are highly sophisticated, stealthy, autonomous cruise missiles, you cannot simply order a factory to print 1,000 more by next Tuesday. Under peacetime manufacturing conditions, building an WRASM takes up to 2 years. This is the empty quiver scenario. It is the realization that in modern, peer-to-peer warfare, possessing the best technology in the world is completely useless if you do not possess enough of it. Beijing knows this. They know that the Chinese Communist Party does not need to build ships that are vastly superior to American ships. They just need to build enough ships to absorb the West's initial volley of missiles, and then roll over the Pacific while the US defense industry scrambles to restart its rusted assembly lines. But the West has finally woken up. The era of just-in-time military manufacturing is dead. We are now witnessing a desperate, violent, multi-billion-dollar race to rebuild the arsenal of democracy. The goal is simple but monumental. Stockpile enough advanced, intelligent anti-ship missiles to ensure that the Chinese fleet runs out of hulls before the West runs out of weapons. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are analyzing the gritty, brutal, industrial reality of modern deterrence. Here is the thesis for this episode. The Anglosphere is currently shifting its military-industrial base from a posture of peacetime efficiency to a posture of wartime mass. We are racing to build 10,000 advanced ship killers. For the last 3 decades, Western militaries operated like Silicon Valley tech companies. They wanted lean supply chains, minimal stockpiles, and hyper-expensive silver bullet weapons. That philosophy works when you are dropping a smart bomb on an insurgent pickup truck in the desert. It is suicidal when you are facing the largest naval armada on the face of the earth, backed by an industrial superpower. We are going to break down the math of deterrence. Why sinking a 10,000-ton cruiser requires dozens of missiles, not just one. We are going to look at the ramp-up, the massive expansion of US production lines churning out the WRASM. We will analyze the swarm strategy that makes these missiles so lethal. And finally, we will look at the ultimate sovereign flex. Australia's historic $850 million bet to build a world-class missile factory on its own soil, ending its absolute reliance on American supply chains. If you are starting to understand why the true balance of power isn't decided by politicians at summits, but by the factory workers welding titanium and programming guidance chips, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We bypass the rhetoric to bring you the logistical realities that actually win wars. Your support keeps this analysis coming. Now, let's look at why the West's magazines were so empty in the first place. The just-in-time suicide. To understand the panic spreading through the Pentagon and the Australian Department of Defense, we have to understand the industrial disease that infected the West following the end of the Cold War. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Western politicians eagerly cashed in the peace dividend. The prevailing theory was that major, high-intensity state-on-state wars were a relic of the past. The future of conflict, they argued, was counterterrorism, peacekeeping, and asymmetric warfare. As a result, the sprawling, massive military-industrial base that had won World War II and stared down the Soviets was systematically dismantled, consolidated, and optimized for profit rather than resilience. The defense industry adopted the commercial sector's just-in-time manufacturing model. Why spend billions of taxpayer dollars to stockpile 5,000 anti-ship missiles in a bunker where they will sit for 20 years and eventually expire? The accountants argued it was much more efficient to keep the production lines running at a bare minimum, producing maybe 40 or 50 missiles a year, just enough to replace the ones used in training exercises. This lean manufacturing model relied on complex, globalized supply chains. The microchips came from Taiwan, the rare earth minerals came from China, the rocket motors came from a single highly specialized factory in the US, and the seeker heads came from a different state. This system works perfectly on a spreadsheet. It is an unmitigated disaster on a battlefield. When the wargames simulated a war over Taiwan, the planners realized that a modern naval battle consumes munitions at a rate that is difficult for the human mind to comprehend. In the span of a single afternoon engagement in the Philippine Sea, a U.S. carrier strike group and a squadron of Air Force bombers could easily fire 200 to 300 long-range anti-ship missiles. Under the just-in-time model, replacing those 300 missiles would take the U.S. industrial base 4 to 5 years. You cannot press pause on a war with China while you wait for the supply chain to catch up. If you run out of missiles on day 4, you lose the Pacific on day 5. The mathematical nightmare. But why do we need 10,000 missiles? The People's Liberation Army Navy plan currently operates roughly 370 ships, and is projected to reach over 400 in the coming years. If they have 400 ships, shouldn't 400 missiles be enough? This is where the brutal mathematics of modern naval combat come into play. It is called the probability of kill, PK, and it is dictated by the density of enemy air defenses. A modern Chinese warship, like the Type 055 Ren high-class cruiser or the Type 052D destroyer, is not a sitting duck. It is a floating fortress of anti-access area denial. A Type 055 is equipped with massive active electronically scanned array, ASA, radars that can detect incoming threats hundreds of miles away. It carries one 12 vertical launch system, VLS, cells, packed with HHQ-9 long-range surface-to-air missiles. It has short-range point defense systems like the HQ-10 and radar-guided rotary cannons, CIWS, that fire thousands of rounds a minute to shred incoming missiles at the last second. It also possesses advanced electronic warfare suites designed to blind and confuse the radar seekers of Western missiles. If an Australian F-35 or a US Navy Super Hornet fires a single older-generation anti-ship missile, like a Harpoon, at a Type 055, the probability of that missile surviving the gauntlet of defenses and actually striking the hull is close to zero. It will be detected, tracked, and shot down miles away from the ship. To guarantee a kill against a high-end Chinese surface combatant, military planners calculate that you must launch a saturation attack. You do not fire one missile, you fire 10 or 15 or 20 at that single ship, arriving simultaneously from multiple different axes. You must fire enough missiles to completely exhaust the ship's magazines. You force them to shoot all of their HHQ-9 interceptors at the first wave of missiles. Once their VLS cells are empty, the ship is defenseless, and the second wave of missiles strikes home. This is the math of deterrence. If you need 15 missiles to reliably sink one major Chinese warship, and the Chinese Navy has dozens of these major warships screening their amphibious landing force, your munition requirement instantly scales into the thousands. The West realized that their magazines were dangerously shallow. They needed a deeper quiver. And they needed a much smarter arrow. The smart killer. The realization that the West needed thousands of missiles led to a massive pivot toward the procurement of the AGM-158C LRASM, long-range anti-ship missile. The LRASM is not a dumb rocket. It is not the Harpoon missile of the 1980s, which essentially flew in a straight line and turned on a simple radar to find the biggest metal object in front of it. The LRASM is an autonomous, stealthy, intelligent apex predator. It is manufactured by Lockheed Martin, but its true genius lies in its highly classified sensor suite developed by BAE Systems. When a B-1B Lancer bomber drops a salvo of 24 LRASMs from high altitude, 500 nautical miles away from the Chinese fleet, the bomber turns around and flies home. The missiles are on their own. The LRASM is designed with the exact same stealth shaping and radar-absorbent materials as fifth-generation fighter jets. It is incredibly difficult for Chinese search radars to detect. But more importantly, it does not rely on GPS. In a major war, the first thing that happens is the jamming or destruction of the GPS satellite constellation. The LRASM is built to survive in a GPS-denied, heavily jammed electronic warfare environment. As it glides low over the surface of the ocean, sea skimming to hide beneath the radar horizon, it operates in strict radio silence. It does not emit active radar waves that would give away its position. Instead, its BAE Systems seeker acts as a passive listener. It absorbs the electromagnetic emissions of the environment. It listens for the specific radar frequencies of Chinese destroyers. The LRASM uses onboard artificial intelligence to identify the threat. It can distinguish a high-value Type 055 cruiser from a low-value frigate or a civilian cargo ship. It literally profiles the enemy fleet. Once it identifies the threat rings, the lethal range of the enemy's air defense missiles, the LRASM autonomously routes itself around them. It flies through the gaps in the radar coverage. If a group of wargames are flying together, they communicate via a secure data link, organizing themselves into a swarm, assigning specific targets to specific missiles to ensure no overlap and maximum destruction. Upon terminal approach, it pops up, activates an imaging infrared seeker to verify the exact silhouette of the target, and aims for the most vulnerable point of the ship, the magazine or the combat information center, before slamming a 1,000-pound penetrator warhead through the hull. It is the deadliest anti-ship weapon currently in the Western arsenal, the industrial surge. But possessing the blueprints for the wargame is not enough. The West needed to mass-produce them. This is where the ramp begins. The United States Department of Defense, recognizing the magazine depth crisis, ordered Lockheed Martin to drastically scale up production. They moved from producing dozens of missiles a year to a target of producing hundreds, aiming eventually to have stockpiles in the thousands. To achieve this, the defense industrial base had to fundamentally transform. Lockheed Martin opened massive new manufacturing facilities, such as the sprawling complex in Troy, Alabama. They did not just build a bigger assembly line, they built a smarter one. They integrated robotics, automated laser alignment tools, and digital twin technology. By creating a perfect digital replica of the missile, engineers can simulate the manufacturing process, identify bottlenecks, and streamline the assembly before a single piece of metal is cut. Furthermore, to incentivize the defense industry to take the massive financial risk of building new factories and hiring thousands of cleared workers, the Pentagon began utilizing multi-year procurement (MYP) contracts. In the past, the government bought missiles 1 year at a time, leaving companies uncertain if they would have orders the following year. With MYPs, the government guarantees the purchase of thousands of missiles over a 5-year period. This provides the corporate stability required to supercharge the supply chain. The gear wheels of the American military-industrial complex, the sleeping giant that won the Second World War, are violently grinding back to life. But the United States knows it cannot supply the entire free world alone. The bottleneck of American production lines required a radical solution. It required the decentralization of the arsenal. The anatomy of a volley. Why is the race to 10,000 missiles so desperate? Because the tactical doctrine required to defeat the People's Liberation Army Navy dictates absolute, overwhelming mass. This is the swarm strategy. If a conflict erupts over Taiwan, the Chinese fleet will not be sitting in a static line waiting to be hit. They will be moving under a massive overlapping umbrella of air defense coverage provided by their destroyers, their land-based long-range surface-to-air missiles, and their carrier-based fighter jets. To penetrate this shield, Western forces cannot trickle missiles into the battle space one by one. A trickle is easily swatted out of the sky by a modern Aegis-equivalent combat system. The only way to kill a heavily defended fleet is to break the processing power of its combat computers and exhaust its physical ammunition. You must orchestrate a multi-domain, synchronized volley. Imagine the geometry of a decisive strike in the South China Sea. The attack is not launched by a single platform. It is a highly coordinated symphony of violence. From the east, a squadron of U.S. Air Force B-1B Lancer bombers, flying out of Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, launch a volley of 72 wargames from high altitude. From the south, an Australian Hobart-class destroyer, integrated into the U.S. Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air (NIFCC) network, launches a volley of Tomahawk Block VA maritime strike cruise missiles. From the depths of the ocean, an Allied nuclear-powered attack submarine, perhaps an American Virginia-class or a British Astute-class operating out of Western Australia, launches torpedoes and submarine-launched anti-ship missiles. And from a dispersed, hidden location on a Pacific island, a U.S. Marine Corps or Australian Army HIMARS battery fires a salvo of precision strike missiles, PRSM, equipped with multi-mode seekers, plunging down from the stratosphere at Mach 4. Multi-domain synchronization. The true terror of this swarm is not just the sheer number of missiles, it is the timing. Through advanced, secure data links and AI-assisted battle management systems like the Australian Air 6500, these diverse weapons, launched from different domains at different speeds from hundreds of miles apart, are programmed for time on target, TOT. The subsonic wargames, the supersonic tomahawks, the hypersonic PRSMs, and the stealthy glide weapons are all mathematically synchronized to arrive at the exact location of the Chinese fleet within the exact same 5-second window. When the Chinese Type 055 cruiser detects the incoming threat, it does not see a single missile. Its radar screens instantly fill with over 100 highly maneuvering, stealthy contacts approaching from a 360-degree radius. The ship's combat system is immediately overwhelmed. The computers struggle to prioritize the threats. The vertical launch cells open and begin ripple-firing HHQ-9 interceptors into the sky. The CIWS rotary cannons spin up, creating a wall of tungsten and depleted uranium. But it is a mathematical impossibility. The ship simply does not possess enough interceptor missiles to shoot down 100 incoming contacts. This is the concept of magazine depletion. The West forces the Chinese fleet to shoot all of their multi-million-dollar interceptors at the first wave of incoming threats, which might even include cheap, electronic warfare decoys like the MALD miniature air-launched decoy. Once the Chinese ships have emptied their VLS cells, they are completely defenseless. The remaining RASMs and naval strike missiles punch through the exhausted defenses, slamming into the hulls of the amphibious transport docks and the aircraft carriers. The fleet dies. This swarm strategy is the only viable way to defeat China's numerical advantage. But to execute a swarm, you need an unfathomable amount of ammunition. You need thousands of missiles ready to go on day one. And this is exactly why Australia decided it could no longer rely solely on shipments from America. The Kongsberg Partnership. The geopolitical reality of 2026 is stark. If a war breaks out in the Pacific, the sea lanes connecting North America to Australia will be highly contested. The U.S. industrial base will be entirely consumed with resupplying its own forces. If the Royal Australian Navy and the Royal Australian Air Force run out of anti-ship missiles, calling Lockheed Martin in Florida and asking for a rush delivery via FedEx is not a viable strategic plan. Australia realized that to be a Tier 1 military power, it must possess sovereign-guided weapons manufacturing. It must be able to forge the spear itself. In a staggering historic announcement, the Australian government committed $850 million to a partnership with Kongsberg Defence Australia to establish a massive, sovereign missile manufacturing facility in Newcastle, near RAF base Williamtown in New South Wales. This is not a maintenance shed. This is a full-scale, high-tech munitions factory. Australia is becoming the first country outside of Norway to manufacture the Deadly Naval Strike Missile, NSM, and the Joint Strike Missile, JSM, on its own soil. This move violently shifts the strategic paradigm. Australia is no longer just a passive buyer of American defense products. It is becoming a critical manufacturer and supplier within the Western Alliance. The weapons being built in Newcastle are the perfect complement to the American RASM. The Naval Strike Missile, NSM, is a fifth-generation highly stealthy sea-skimming cruise missile. It is designed specifically to operate in the cluttered, complex littoral environments of archipelagos, exactly the kind of environment found in the South China Sea and the Indonesian Straits. It uses an advanced, passive imaging infrared seeker. It does not emit radar waves. It flies inches above the wave tops, hiding in the sea clutter, and uses an onboard database of ship silhouettes to autonomously identify and target the specific weak points of an enemy vessel. It is the missile that will arm the Australian Hobart-class destroyers and the Anzac-class frigates, the Southern Arsenal. But the true jewel in the crown of the Newcastle facility is the Joint Strike Missile, JSM. The JSM is a variant of the NSM, explicitly designed from the ground up to integrate perfectly with the F-35A Lightning II stealth fighter. Here is the tactical brilliance of the JSM. Most anti-ship missiles, like the Harpoon or even the RASM, are too large to fit inside the internal weapons bay of the F-35. They must be carried externally on the wings. When an F-35 carries weapons externally, it ruins its radar cross-section. It ceases to be a stealth fighter and becomes visible to enemy radar. The Kongsberg JSM is designed to fit entirely inside the internal weapons bay of the F-35A. This means an Australian F-35 can take off from RAF base Tyndall in the Northern Territory, remain completely invisible to Chinese radar, penetrate deep into contested airspace, and unleash a devastating, autonomous ship killer without ever compromising its stealth profile. By building the NSM and JSM in New South Wales, Australia is creating a southern arsenal. This solves the US bottleneck problem. If the factories in California or Alabama are bombed or disrupted by cyber attacks, or simply backlogged with orders for the US Navy, the Australian Defence Force does not grind to a halt. The Newcastle facility will continuously churn out these apex predators, feeding the magazines of the Royal Australian Navy and the RAF independently. Furthermore, this factory provides strategic depth for the entire alliance. If the US Pacific Fleet exhausts its munitions, US warships could theoretically pull into Fleet Base East in Sydney, load Australian-manufactured naval strike missiles into their launchers and return to the fight. Australia is building a fortress of industry. We are proving that the Anglosphere is not a collection of dependent client states, but a highly integrated, distributed network of manufacturing powerhouses. The race to build 10,000 anti-ship missiles is not an arms race born of aggression. It is an arms race born of desperate deterrence. The Western Alliance looked at the war games. They looked at the empty silos, the fragile supply chains, and the terrifying shipbuilding capacity of the Chinese Communist Party. They recognized the uncomfortable reality that hope is not a strategy, and that leaning on the legacy of World War II will not save us in World War III. To prevent the next global conflict, the West must prove to Beijing beyond a shadow of a doubt that a naval invasion is a mathematical impossibility. We must prove that for every ship China launches, the West possesses 10 intelligent, stealthy, autonomous missiles ready to sink it. From the massive robotic assembly lines of Lockheed Martin in the American South to the state-of-the-art sovereign forge of Kongsberg in New South Wales, the West is rearming. We are shifting from just-in-time vulnerability to wartime mass. We are stockpiling the ultimate ship killers. We are preparing the swarm. And we are ensuring that if the order is ever given, the magazines of the free world will not run dry. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you think Australia's $850 million investment in domestic missile manufacturing is enough to secure our sovereignty, or do we need to be building even heavier, longer-range weapons? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay realistic, and we'll see you in the next one.